To know who we are, and where we're going, we must know how we arrived here. Welcome to Rephetic, a revolutionary study of the Great Pyramid, which promises to rewrite civilization's history.
Are we starting now?
We missed audio in the beginning.
Okay.
So
thanks for having me back on Rephetic.
Jeremy, welcome to the Rephetic podcast.
Yeah.
Hello, listener, viewer.
Hello, viewer.
I think that hopefully that stayed the same.
You know, I thought I recognized him.
Take
Hi
two.
There. Yeah, right.
Anyway, yeah. Right. So you were saying midlife crisis, viewer.
Well, what I was trying to think of was, because previous to us not recording, we were thinking about who might be the people who would be the most curious in the kind of explorations that you embark upon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what I was trying to then key in on was, I wonder what the circumstances are in somebody's life that would cause them to be like, I should turn my head this direction, you know? So that's why I was like, if we were going to try to categorize a viewer, there's this U-turn that your life starts to take right around, like for most people in Western world anyway, it's right around 40, in your 40s,
yeah.
You know, where you start to go like, hey, I made some of those decisions early on, and you feel that possibility closing. Like the things I could have done or I could have explored are starting to close down. Death becomes more imminent, right? Like you see that it's there. You've likely had friends die. You've had loss. You've had all kinds of stuff. You've made decisions you didn't like. You have that combined with like I said, like there was this hope that you had when you were in your 20s about like, here's everything I could do. And there's so many things, right? And now it feels like there's like three things. There's like three things I can do, right? Like there's this, like I'm just locked into this, like, you know, I've just got to ride this out, I guess, you know, and your parents are getting older, all that stuff. So I was trying to think of like who might be the people who would be the most open to thinking about exploring this Rephetic journey with you. And it seemed like, at least in the Western world, it might be people who are like 42.
Precisely at their midlife crisis.
Right at their midlife, right, yeah.
Our market is 39 to
46. Yeah,
42.
Like
no.
Right,
if you've had your 43rd birthday, you've
probably aged out of the midlife crisis peak. Yeah, maybe you're coming to the other side. I mean, there is, you know, what you offer through this is, it's not a comfort. It's just another look at reality, you know? And I think that too often, the things that we serve up to that 39 to 42 audience are those abstracted, like brometic, everything will just be okay, everything's going to turn out just fine kind of stuff.
Some consoling placeholder type stuff.
Right, yeah, stuff that you could put on a piece of wood and sell it at Marshall's and put it up in your dining room or something, right? Like, so that kind of thing is usually what we sell.
Yeah.
And I think that what you're offering is something that looks more like here's an invitation into a Jungian analysis of like, this is the shadow side of the things that you faced. Not only did you make those terrible decisions, sure you did, and that was you and you did it, but you can recontextualize those. Like those actually can take on new meaning for you, and they actually might make things more possible that maybe you didn't realize. And like there's a format that is implicit even in the exploration of how might these pyramids have gotten here? Could it be that maybe like there's the entire basic assumption you had about what was possible was actually what was off to begin with, you know? You offer a tangible way into that analysis.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is all bizarre in its own right? I mean, like just recently we sat down with Elizabeth, you know, a clinical therapist and whatever. Right. And it's like, none of this was intentional, surely, right? The work on the Great Pyramid was not intentional.
Right.
It became that, right after I had the idea. It's like, well, here's your, And that, interesting, that happened at 39.
Midlife
so
crisis.
anyway,
Right,
yeah,
right.
of course,
Yeah, exactly.
of
You're
course.
separated from reality here. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and we've talked also, it's like, you go through the why me, who could or should or would do this.
Right.
And your response was always like, well, who better?
Who better to do it?
Yes,
Right.
yes,
Than
yes.
the person to whom the message is delivered. Right.
Yeah. And, how many people have this groomed muscle of introspection and self-examination? I mean, I would argue a lot of people do, but maybe not so acutely as let's say we do, because it kind of, your life depends on it. So that, I've mentioned that before.
Yeah.
But the actual process, much like the adoption thing, and I think you can go through that even though you don't have a suppressed adoption as your life reality. Right. And any midlife thing. And I would suspect, I mean, we talked briefly about this, but I would think it's different for women, females versus males, in that, you face those things, I guess, maybe approaching like an empty nest situation where now we're indexing for grandparenthood, right? Mm-hmm. So that, I think that's a kind of a different context than what males go through. But don't you think?
I do think it's nuanced for sure.
Right.
I think that what is transcendent, or what is underneath all of it, though, I think, is there's just some sense that what if I had done this instead? Like counterfactual type stuff happening at the same time, like I say, and the reason that those things become more prominent is because you get the results of some of the decisions you made, and you're like, how did I end up here? Right. And sure, I have then you bear sort of the guilt of even thinking about counterfactuals, because you're like, well, for me to even contend with a counterfactual means I don't have that kid, but I'd have another awesome kid, right? Or I didn't have this marriage, but I'd have this awesome marriage. I wouldn't have these friends, and I wouldn't be on Dave's podcast, but I'd have these other awesome friends, right? And so you try to sate your desire for some kind of like what could have been, and I think that again, that's coupled with the timing generally, especially now. Your parents are getting older. You see death more clearly, so there's something marching towards you. Now again, like, you intellectually understood that was always there, but now it's like right here.
Yeah.
And so the ground is fertile for something like the kind of and it's not obvious where it starts. It's never obvious where, some kind of path, like what it is you talk about in the explorations that you do, or maybe the path that we're on, like there's some kind of path of liberation where it's like, well, what if I, instead of trying to figure out how I could rejigger or optimize my life for the best possible outcomes and just march toward this death, what if instead I could have some path of liberation from that?
Yeah.
What if there was something that the basic assumption of what was holding it together is actually what was off? What if, like you're saying, the adoption scenario, what if I learned that I was actually adopted, right? Or, like those kinds of, like, well, what is that shift then? Well, that changes the meaning of nearly everything,
Right.
And that means, therefore, that any number of things are actually more possible, and it's more hopeful, oddly, to just acknowledge, like, some kind of liberation. Like, this is no longer serving me. I'm going to let this one go. Like, this one's no longer serving me. I'm going to let this go. Whatever the notions are, the dogma, whatever it is that's holding you,
Yeah, okay. Doesn't that set up a scenario where it's basically the snake eating its tail? Like, we're right back to like that teenage emancipation point where, say, you want to go backpack in Europe, you want to live in a commune, you want, you want to enter polygamous relationships. What do you want to do exactly?
Right.
So
Yeah, right.
how much of this old narrative are you going to undo,
Yeah.
or redo, and then it just but then it reflects to identity. Like, so good luck. I mean, this is why I think it's acutely troublesome. Is I'm gonna make those decisions like you're talking about, and I'm basically forming an identity, but self-image, image within relationships, and then even a public image or work life or whatever, down to like our fitness regimen or meditation or continued learning, right? It's like, do I want to? I mean, I did this, and I suppose a lot of people do, but it was like, well, I started in community theater to try to help my writing, okay? And then it was, like however many years ago, I did yoga for the first time. And it's like, well, this really helps to change my body and my breathing, which then changes some other things.
Your awareness, your presence, all of it.
But
right?
none of that was part of all those initial decisions, right?
Right.
And or even the image that went along with them. So I would just say, like, on any trajectory that I find myself on, even today's trajectory, there's an immediacy to introducing new things, rewriting the story. Elizabeth, we talked about the story all the time because she does the EDMR therapy stuff, where you're reworking your memories with eye movement, stuff like that.
Wow.
Under a clinical setting.
That's trippy.
So people are seeing immediate results after one session.
Sure.
Transformative, life-changing after 7 or 8 sessions.
Right. Right.
So those with PTSD or other issues also, where we have to rewrite the story. And like Euro is talking about the greater story, or this story nested in the story nested in the story. Yeah. Like where does it fucking end? It doesn't,
right?
It doesn't end. And so but for the viewer,
the one, the midlife crisis viewer.
Yeah. But it's so we're on this continuum of both time and place and maturation, and each new day presents this thing.
Right. I mean, I think, let me see. Firstly, I think that the midlife thing, while real, is largely illusory. And the chronology is largely illusory, going back to your snake eating its tail metaphor, which is the way in which a good number of cultures for a long time have understood the nature of our concept of time. Those things aren't, there is a reality to that, but that's not the only reality. And that reality does a really good job at its own public relations inside your head.
Right.
And it tells you that you are on a linear path and you are marching toward a death. And that is the reality. And I think that there is a larger reality that's actually underlies all of this, that is transcendent, that isn't tied into the sap of the chronology time, right? And we experience it all the time. We experience it in the things that are eternal, that are in our lives, or the things that have the most meaning for us. And we get these glimpses into, there's something that's underneath this that is a greater reality than this thing I'm locked into. And the reason that that's even important at all is because, or useful, I think, when it comes to a way out or some kind of liberation in your thinking or some greater kind of fulfillment in your life, is the option of the souled reality, the PR reality, the chronology time, is how can I optimize each and every moment to maximize the outputs and get my ROI on that, right? And there's these optimization schemes, right? Well, if you wake up at this time and you follow this routine and you do this like this and you blah, 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 like, right? And you're just marching toward this thing. The only thing that you get out of that you know, in and of itself is just you get a death, you know, and that's basically the best you get, you know, unless any of the behavior, unless any of that is intended to signal like, what might I be opening myself to? What other kind of reality might be offered to me with yoga, presence, breathing, with explorations of, I did make these decisions. Let me run a counterfactual, not out of being mired in some kind of self-hatred, but in like, what might have occurred, right? What meaning might that have had for me? And how might I be able... There's a dog snoring that is getting picked up by our mics.
That's funny.
He is just fine. And he is not at all stuck in the sap of chronology.
I know.
He
It's so
is
good.
fully present in this moment because, you know, the only thing you really need to do is exist. Like there's all, and I know I'm not trying to be bromidic even in what I'm saying, but like that is a greater reality. There is actually nothing that needs to be achieved. There's nothing that needs to get, like all of that stuff is stuff that someone has piled on you.
Right.
Or, you know, whatever. Now there's a difference between that and like, I want to achieve a thing and I'd like to see it exist in the world. Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there you want to have chronology because you want to be able to see something develop.
Yeah, beginning,
over time.
middle, end,
exactly.
goals,
There's a narrative
whatever.
there.
Yeah.
It feels like there's something that is better suited for that reality.
Yeah.
You know?
But living itself or being itself
Right.
is just restricted and stifled and caged in this sap of that chronology and preparation for death. And it's like, well, what's the point of your life? Is just to, you know, optimize for some false sense of preparation for the end.
Right.
Like what?
I ran the Chicago Marathon years and years ago, and I trained diligently for it as much as I understood training diligently for the Chicago Marathon. And it was one of these days, this seems to happen to me often, where whatever day I choose to do some kind of distance event, they always characterize it as unseasonably warm. Right, so I was just not, my body was not acclimated to what it is that was about to happen to me. And I, of course, also went out really fast, right? I was feeling good. I had been tapering off my mileage and my legs felt good. And so I ran and I found like a pace group and I got in with this pace group. And the pace group was faster than maybe what I intended, but I was feeling good. So I'm going along. Like maybe I got past the half marathon. So it was like maybe 14, 15. My legs seized up and I just could hardly move them. And I hadn't been taking the nutrition. I hadn't been, you know, eating the salt tablets and some other things that I knew might set me up for a better experience and whatever. But I ended up just seizing up completely. And I could just like barely move. And I limp, I think, my slowest ever marathon for like, because I, of course, in the dogged sort of mule-headed way, was like, well, I have to finish the marathon because otherwise life is meaningless, right? I mean, so you just like push yourself along for no real good reason, but you do, and you get done, and like, it is just woefully disappointing to go through something like you know, you trained for, and then I started doing the calculations on the number of times that I went for a run instead of spending time with my kids, or instead of hanging out with loved ones, or instead of finishing some kind of work project, or, you know, something like, there's this calculus I started to do of like a ledger of time that I put towards something that I blew up and completely tanked and sucked at, right? So it isn't just that it sucked and it was painful. It sucked and it took time away from something that ostensibly I said was important to me.
Right.
And so I started doing that calculus, right? And so then you're like, well, not only did this suck, I'm a bad person. Like, I am actually a bad person. Like, my character is flawed, obviously, because I made those choices, right? And you just get mired in, and then your body hurts. So then you're just like, even more signals. Like, this is a lesson from God and the universe about what a bad person you are. The reason it hurts is because God doesn't like you, and the universe doesn't like you, and it's never liked you. And that's evident everywhere, right? Not only, and like all, right? I mean, this is just like, you can go down this and this was just also, this was insignificant. This is a marathon. Who gives a shit, right? I mean,
Right.
who cares, right? But you do in the moment when you're hurting. And so all of the kind of, that sort of stuff. There's another thing that you'd think would be like meaningful out of this. That would be like, well, you learn from your mistakes and you train better next time and blah, 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 blah. But I will say, I mean, and while that is in part true, like, because after that I was able to achieve something better,
Different
have
training,
some better experiences, different training, whatever. Those things to me were the minor piece. The better piece to me was I learned what it was like to lose. I learned what it was like to go through that kind of a pit and come out on the other side. And therefore, it made it easier in moments of loss to go, like, there was a meaning to the time that I devoted to it. And actually, in those moments, I experienced a lot of joy during training
lead
and
up,
all the lead up. And that those things actually had a lot of meaning to me. And even getting the chance to have those 15 miles I had that I was feeling really good, that would, but like, you can't philosophically do that for someone. You can't approach someone who's in the doom loop and tell them, like, well, it'll be okay and you'll recontextualize. But, and it's not until, like, you have to go through the, like, just feel all of that shit. Like, for a moment, get really familiar with the pain of all of that and then be able to recontextualize it. Like, you can't, what we were saying the other night, you can't borrow wisdom. Like, that isn't a thing that you can give someone.
Right.
You can give someone, like, here's a thing that I did and here's my story about what happened to me. But you can't, like, here's wisdom, here's experience. Like, no. Like, somebody has to walk that.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I hope we're learning along the way.
Me too.
So when you were mentioning that marathon, it seems my issues start when I'll attach meaning or significance, right, and self-importance to me or to other people, kind of almost at the inception. This is going to mean this. This is going to mean that.
Right.
My life, my career, my parenting, my whatever, time with friends. Let's say, how many times, we have an anticipation of a trip, let's say.
Yeah.
Like my last fishing trip with
my
buddy.
Yeah.
It's like, I had so much meaning and anticipation behind the trip, whatever. And then if it doesn't fulfill, first of all, it's never going to fulfill the importance that I've just generated this whole fantasy of its importance, and its importance to me, and that's never really fulfilled. But I think part of that is like a decision up front, whereas the decision up front could be, I just want to be present. Let's take a road trip. Let me look at all these plants you have here, right? Like the dog is napping.
Right.
There's just now.
Right.
That's it.
That's the greater reality. Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And
you're getting right.
Whatever goes on in the head and the linear time and the executive. I woke up in the middle of the night the other night, and I just had about an hour and a half worth of, random creative thoughts.
Yeah.
Stream of consciousness, let's say. I didn't write it all down, but I did. I talked with Patty about it. But the point was a unification of being, right, in the present.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I think that you can't not. At least I haven't met people who don't cast images of their preferred outcomes. You start something, and you wouldn't have started it if you didn't have some preferred outcome.
Yeah. Including meaning?
Including any of it.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
You do. I mean, I mean, you can try, I suppose, to be like, that's not important, right? Or whatever. But like, I think there's a posture that you can develop over time, and maybe this is even the point of that marathon story, and also even what you were just talking about with the fishing trip, right? It's like, because I think that fishing trip has had a lot of meaning for you. We've talked about it a number of times. And it did create some new basis, like something interesting for you, some new understanding even of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
It didn't match the preferred image you had when you, at the outset.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it didn't have a supreme value to you. But I think that one of the things that you can do actively at the inception is to at least call that preferred image what it is, which is a delusion. It's a preferred image, and that's not bad. Like it's in fact it's part of a human condition. Like you even if, and there's tons of people like that I meet, in particular like engineer-minded folks, who will take the entire cascade of what's possible at the outset of a project or a day or whatever, and they will reduce it to like, this is the outcome that is optimized that we're seeking.
Right.
And you will work hard to produce that outcome. And there is something useful in that too. But I think that some acknowledgement that this is our preferred outcome, and that, it's in part diluted.
Yeah.
Like it's in part like, and that's okay. It's just part of the myth. It's part of the story. And like, I can't remember the name of there's this, it's like a Zen koan that exists about a farmer and his son. And, this farmer goes through these periods of time where he has a cow, and the cow, gets sick, let's say. And
did you tell this on your last podcast?
Oh, did I?
I don't know.
Oh, maybe I did. Anyway, whatever. The point is, and we've talked about this, so it could have been on the last podcast.
Or it could have been a discussion. But
yeah, it's really just the point of like, I'm not a good judge of good thing, bad thing. And the moment I get into the chair, that like I said, that sold to you reality of these are optimal outcomes, suboptimal outcomes, whatever. That to me is actually more diluted than the delusion of I would like to produce this kind of experience. If there's like levels of delusion, it's the level of that Chicago Marathon was shit, right? Or whatever. Or I'm judging that outcome as bad or good.
Yeah.
And the point about the farmer story is he goes through a series of these things that happen in his life. And at the outset, it would seem a good thing, bad thing. I don't know, right? So the cow gets sick, right? Can't produce milk, whatever. Is that a good thing, bad thing? Well, it seems pretty obvious it's a bad thing. Milk is what you sell at the market to be able to, like,
it's kind of the reason you have a cow.
That's why you have a cow, right? But then it turns out that cow built an immunity to that sickness, is able to come out of that sickness. Some of the other cows die, so your milk can actually be sold at a higher price because of the market value. So good thing, bad thing. Hard to say. Your son is out there working the fields, whatever, gets injured. Good thing, bad thing.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like a bad thing. He can't do the labor. Well, then there's a war that emerges, and they want to take all the healthy young men to go off and die in this war, right? Well, he can't go to war because he's injured. Good thing, bad thing.
Right.
I guess we'll find out, right? I mean, is one way to put it. But what it is it is just a thing. It's the snake eating its tail. It is just what had to be because it was. Like it's all the way that those things fold in on themselves. And what I would say is I think that the hopefulness, again, in your message, in a lot of this, is that there's always more possible than it would seem. There's always more possible in terms of meaning, in terms of outcome, in terms of what's there for you. The richness, like we talked about, those layers of the stories within the story.
Yeah.
There is a richness to this world and the universe.
Right.
All those counterfactuals that you hold with yourself where you're like, I made this decision to marry this person, we had this kid, whatever. This went badly, whatever. I'll never experience going to these Mayan things, and I've always wanted to go to those. Maybe I will. I've always wanted to experience this. I'll never get to go. And there's one way to look at that that's like, I'll never be able to experience all the things I want to. Another way to see it is this world is so rich with treasure and experience and meaning and relationships and stories that you can't not delve into the richness. Like that is
Right.
part of the thing too, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. That's what I think
Okay.
is at the basis of your Rephetic thing that I think is so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, even to bring it home, you know, like identity, let's say self-image, knowing where we are, or not even that, just examining where we are. It's not about any conclusion. Like we're saying that, so we got all these warring hats, let's say, or characters. That here's the judgment character, here's the assessment character, here's the value character, here's the tricksters over here going ha da da, like the trickster is who I most identify with.
Of course you do, right? I would have said that.
Yeah, but not the conservative, forthright, draw within the lines kind of thing and all that. But regardless of where, let's say the viewer is,
That one guy.
but I guess, is it not the case that like the importance is on the willingness
Yeah.
to look, the willingness to say, well, here's what's fruitful in my life.
Yeah.
Here's the benefits. Here's the presence. Here's the wisdom I'm gaining, whatever. Even if I did none of those things, right? Like I always see, ads for travel, right? Like travel the world, discover blah, 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 blah,
Right.
So, and it was somebody's old saying was, you can travel the world and learn nothing.
Yes.
Or the philosopher can sit in his room and learn everything there is to learn.
Yeah, right.
But you don't. It's like it's here. It's now. It's in the street. It's I'm hanging out with my granddaughter Mags.
I think that
The language barriers, the knowing my own limitations. So there's all these various functions. Some executive, some introspective, some outward. Right. Ultimately, like, what am I trying to do? Not only do, but who am I trying to be?
Yeah.
That's I think at the essence of all of that.
Yes. Right. Yes. Well, and those phrases, like you're saying, like the being versus doing, I think they signal that underlying greater reality. And there's the other one that we get sold. We have to live in. In some ways, like you don't really have a choice. Like you live in the chronology time. You have to develop things. We've got to get up in the morning. We have things to take care of. Somebody has to take the trash out and pay the taxes, like yesterday, April 15th. All that stuff, right? Like there is just, to exist in this civic order in our current cultural milieu, there's stuff you deal with, right? But that, it need not be separated from your being. And it need not be just something you do as a march, like you're saying. I think that the question that you, like I say, it's implicit in your work and even just in knowing you for years, is the like, what could this mean for me? Like, what could this be for me? And that kind of posture toward a new experience at the outset, or toward something that actually went poorly, challenges I've had, when we've talked after I've had something that happened that really knocked me on my ass, where I started assigning meaning to who I am, right? As a result of a decision or a series of decisions or poor whatever. And you were like, yeah, that doesn't change the being. Like, you're still, there is a nature to you and there is meaning there. And what could it be for you that you're going through this? What could it be for you? And I think, to me, that if there is the viewer, to me that's the start of that path toward some kind of liberation for yourself, because no one can tell you what it could be for you. Like I can't tell you what anything would mean for you. That's stuff that you have to assign for yourself. But
Yeah.
the reason I think you're a trickster is usually because you do a good job of standing in the doorway between like the current, like souled reality and the greater reality, where it's just sort of like this whisper of like, hey, what could this be for you? You know, what could that be for you?
Yeah.
You know, and that's where I think you do get on identity, because it's it has to do with, you know, you know when you're in the presence of someone who at least has done some amount of this work. At least it's been my experience, because they're operating out of like their nature. They're just like, you can sense from someone, you know, that that's what's happening, right? When you're in the presence of it, or when you see a great work of art,
right.
Or when you don't have to be trained in psychology or trained in art criticism to witness beauty or understand what it is. But you can see and experience people where you're like, this person's just operating at some other vibration that doesn't have to do with this locked in crap.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. I experienced a conflict because of that. Small one. But yeah, I don't know how it happened, but that's the only way I know how to operate in the world. Like I got rid of all the other ways.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like I think there's an onion, you know, peel the onion thing. Yeah. It's like, well, let me communicate to this effect. Let me live to this effect. Let me do this because of this. And I had rationalizations, justifications for like all these various things, right?
Right.
And as you start to let those go, because whatever meaning or fulfillment that I can, back to the almost, you know, whatever I determined would be the meaning, this optimizing, whatever, wishful goal thinking, delusional, never turned out nothing ever turns out the way I wanted to, you know? Yeah. So it's like, well, how about let this go? Like, so it's like, and then also it was like, let me invest. See, I mean, I have so many issues. I mean, I have just issues in these modes of operation. Let's say materialism, or, you know, be this kind of parent, or do this, say that, don't do this, don't say that.
Right.
Who the fuck knows,
right.
man?
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah, you like, you're notorious for the fuck it, man. Like, flip a coin, it's 50-50, whatever.
Yeah, that's a whole that's a whole philosophical well, right? chunk
it is
of
like,
my existence.
It's the middle.
That is at the middle, you know. Oh, you're so good on your choices,
right? Yeah,
you know.
Right.
Well, look at my success rate,
right?
Like, first of all, you're not the assessor,
right?
You know. And if you really looked at anything, this is the trickster thing. Now humanity, let's say, well, you know what? You're about 50-50 on all your decisions.
Yeah.
That smacks of,
right.
Wait a second. I've convinced myself I'm at least 80-20 to the positive.
Well, I think
here's my proficiency.
That's a quick sort of, and I don't mean to interrupt you. I know you were on a
no,
thing, but like
this thing's not going away.
There's a quick, like, this, all your decisions are 50-50. Let's just say that, let's take that phrase and put it over here and say at the basic level, that's at the core. There's a quick sort of like a almost infinite regression that you can get into of complete nihilism as a result of that kind of thing. It's possible, is what I'm saying.
But the other side of
that coin, though, right? Exactly, is, well, that means that I'm liberated from the pressure of having to make perfect decisions.
Yeah.
Well, shit.
Or then attaching expectation
to it, whatever. Right.
Nursing the self-aggrandizing feedback loop.
The time spent that I have to use to convince myself that the decision I made was a good one. All of those things are things you get back. And what will you do with that? Well, what you can do is make more things possible. You can make more potential new realities. You can make more potential new whatever, you know, like, and you can optimize. If you're going to optimize, you can optimize for that. Like, you know what I mean? You
can optimize for experience,
right,
and perspective,
right,
and presence,
Right.
right? Ultimately presence. Like Brandon called me like last week.
Yeah.
Like, hey, can you be here in 20 minutes and watch mags? I'm like, sure.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Whatever else I'm doing,
Right.
just it can fucking wait.
Right.
So again, if I get out of that, I mean, I've talked about it as playing God in my own life for myself, let's say. Like I've totally stopped for the most part playing God in other people's lives. Like that's about a futile exercise, right?
No kidding.
But then inwardly, it's like if I can maybe stop playing God in my own life or my own thoughts or whatever, then I can. So the decisions are 50-50. My interactions with people is probably 50-50, right?
Yeah.
I'm no one really significant, not that important. I'm going to expire. Could be soon, could be within the next couple decades.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
It's definitely going to be, sooner than whatever.
It's always sooner than the last time I said it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, like my birthday's in 2 days, 54. Right. So like this is the thing about being is it's all happening at the now.
Right.
Everything.
Right.
The big wave of the long tail of history is crashing now.
Yeah.
The impositions of death in the future is happening
right
now.
now.
Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
This is a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot of pressure. And people see, this is, I think, an issue is, do people really come to terms with it? Or we're just in this we've got our marching orders, we've got our optimization plan, we've got our checklist, and we're. Well,
I think we're notorious as a species for what I might just call this. It takes us a while to accept a reality, right? I mean, we saw this during like pandemic or other things where it's like when a reality shifts, people are like, oh, okay, so that's the reality. Okay, I'm just going to keep doing the thing I was doing. Oh, wait, I guess I probably should be worried about, I don't know, right? It takes us a while, I mean, I think we just naturally are inclined that way. There's probably some Darwinian explanation for this about how...
Or Newtonian.
Right, or whatever. That's just like, look, right, exactly. Like, yeah,
The
there's a
object in
physics. Yeah,
motion.
like it tends to stay in motion. There's something like that to it. But I suppose also just from our species, like we have old bags. Like these things that we live in are old. Like in comparison to the levels of development in other places in our world. Or in our realities, like there's all these impending realities, right? So like if you were running from a predator in the woods, however many millennia ago as a human species, and it seemed like there's something that might reshape your reality, you probably didn't want to stop and ask yourself what the meaning of that was, because you should probably keep running from the predator because that's operation number one. Right. And so we are optimized, I think, for that. And that's part of the challenge of all these other, like the other layers of reality that do exist. We now have both the benefit and the curse of not having to run so hard from predator generally. Like we're not under threat of physical attack or the things that our old bodies told us that we're optimized for.
Yeah, and that explains the attention capture and everything else. Yeah. No, I mean, it's so easy. It's so easy.
Right.
Which, I don't talk about it much, but, the whole McClellan's media theory and the medium is the message and whatever.
Yeah.
And the message, since, I just thought about this the other night, since the advent of it, if it bleeds, it leads, which is about, give or take, 30, 35 years.
Right.
The play is for our negative fear-based reaction to capture our attention.
Right.
But here's the sinister part, is that entire mechanism is there to make us insecure and sell us the shit.
Yeah.
that the advertisers are selling.
Yeah.
And so the media company is just the middleman between
Yeah.
time and space, your attention, and an advertiser's product to meet the insecurity which we fostered.
Correct.
That's fucking stupid.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the gaming of dopamine is a prevalent lever for
That's
media.
it. That's the aim.
It's exactly. So I get a rush, and the things that we're you're right. It does signal then the McLuhan work and any number of sort of articulations of the fact. Like I said, the reality that does its own PR job is both chronology, but it's also short term. Like it has like a high time preference. So it says that time should be taking place like now.
Mm-hmm.
So I can order things that are delivered to me. I can interact with people. Like the gaming of the system to deal with now. What's not talked about are like low time preference aims at an image of possible futures or making something more possible that's going to live after I do. 50, 60, 70, 3 or 4 generations from now,
Mm-hmm.
which is the necessary posture of some set of beings that want to do something like, I don't know, build pyramids.
Right.
Because there's no rational reason to do that. There is nothing served by doing that other than we need a chance at greatness. We need a chance at doing something. When I say greatness, I just mean that the scope of the thing is so much bigger than any of the beings that are currently alive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like we're setting our sights on something that has such a low time preference that any of those decisions made, short term, long, whatever, they get contextualized by there's a thing that we're after, right? This runs, like I say, I think that's why it is. It's important and good to acknowledge that you have preferred visions of the future. There's things that I'd love to see that come out.
Right.
It just doesn't mean that the only meaning that can be assigned to it is that that's the particular outcome. And that some openness to, well, what else could it be? Or what else might it happen?
Right.
Like, to me, those are the ways that you start to game the dopamine rush. You start to game you can run your own game counter to the fear-based shit and the dopamine rush and whatever by saying, like, these are the kinds of worlds I'd love to make more possible.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of that, let's call it aims. Let's say aims that will outlast us, individually or even collectively. So I thought about this the other day in terms of like people naming let's say their podcast is named after them.
Okay.
And we give things names, whatever.
Sure.
And it always smacked me of a little short-sighted, like the Rush Limbaugh show ended when he ended.
Yeah.
I mean,
it did and it didn't. Yeah.
Well, or just whatever.
Yeah.
Is it, I mean, certain things can transcend the individual. I'm not saying it can't, but it seems far more appropriate. Don't attach it to you if it is something that is going to outlive you.
Well, yeah. I mean, my partner, business partner, Elliot Frick, who is responsible for a good amount of some amount of even the outlooks on life I have, because we have philosophical conversations and I borrow from his understanding of the universe all the time and I'm inspired by it and such. But, one of the things that we talk about often, and I don't mean to bring work into this necessarily, but like the work we do with helping organizations to establish some greater meaning for what it is they're doing as the basis for change or transcendence or doing something significant or whatever it is. The instinct that, and these are executives that I'm not saying, like, if you had it doesn't necessarily mean your IQ is insane or something, but there is a degree, like you could argue that people who find themselves in CEO roles or roles that are, have greater sort of decision making, authority, and such. That there's something that was done there from a selection process that these people are operating at levels of integration for understanding what's happening in an organization and such that that somebody who's in middle management or whatever that doesn't have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Doesn't mean that they're not whatever. So my point is, even people who've been selected through for this kind of process, when you ask them like, well, in 50 years from now, what do you hope, or in generations, let's say like in 3 generations from now, what is the impact you hope to have on the market or on the world that you're able to reach, right? What impact do you hope is left behind, right? And they will say things about like, well, that we are known as the premier group that did all the awesome shit, right? And the issue with that is that, like, to your point of like the Rush Limbaugh show, is like, no one's going to give a shit about you or who you are. And so the point is but if you look at like maybe if you look at this against something like there was a school of design, and yet another reason why I cite Eliot in this is he uses it often. There's a school of design called Bauhaus that existed for a good amount of time, and it became like the vanguard of design for a good amount of time. And even me mentioning the term Bauhaus, maybe the one viewer will know it, but probably not. But you are familiar with it if you've had an Apple product, because the impact that Bauhaus design has had this multiplier impact on even the way, like, these little curved lines that are on things, and the friendliness and the Montserrat type font, and like all this stuff all comes from this Bauhaus. Nobody talks about Bauhaus unless you're in design.
Right.
But you know it.
Yeah.
Because it had an impact on the universe, right? Like it's impacted the way that these things are particularly made. Now I'm getting very narrow with that. But my only point in that is that's the kind of thing that's necessary for. So if it's for this one viewer we have, it's like, what meaning might your life have where you don't really get the credit? Like, what kind of things might you be able to make more possible? That's your shot at greatness. It isn't that people will remember your name or care about you or make a vigil for you or cherish your memory, put fake flowers on your grave. Right. It's about like, what kind of world might you be able to make more possible in the chronology sap that we're locked into that wouldn't otherwise be possible?
Yeah. Yeah. Boy, if I don't know that you were trying to peak all of this in me where I am.
Of course I was. This was the intervention.
Damn it. Anyway. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. Well, and then again, I mean, I don't so much want to talk about me, but these are all the things I had to really confront, or even just digest. Was like, well, okay, so even seemingly insignificant things, like the name of the project, Rephetic.
Right.
Let me create this word.
Yeah.
That is what it is.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know how that happened.
Right.
But it's all flowing into the stream of a thing which come to me.
What you received.
Yeah. And that I've been willing to pursue.
Right.
That's it. And you can get into the judging of it. You can get into all the milieu, to use your coined word that you love.
Accoutrements.
Not to get lost in the minutia. But anyhow, it's like, okay, well let's even look at a couple of these things, like we talked about last time, was like, there's nothing wrong with selling stamps, working at the post office. Yes, no. I get all that. And not everybody, other than, let's say, even teaching their kids, right? That's a generational thing. Mm-hmm. But it gets lost, let's say, before your grandparents, I don't know, great grandparents, I really don't know shit about those people. But you have the residue of what they taught the grandparents. I said all down the line, but it's like, well, here, pick the name of the thing, which obviously describes the thing or is the thing, and then that's going to continue, right? Stuff that, and I'm going to have a podcast or several with Brandon, my son Brandon, just to go over some of this stuff,
Yeah.
But occasionally you get to consider things which are clearly bigger than yourself and clearly are going to far outlast you.
Yeah.
Especially if you complete the task, right? So, which was, part of what I said was like this intervention. It's like, oh, I'm fucking bogged down in the middle of this.
Yeah.
In the middle of the end, let's say.
You are.
Right?
Yeah.
Crashed my computer.
Right.
I've started what seemed to be 12 academic articles.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Oh, I'm saying like the reason that I spend this time on presence and clarity and being is because that's what the only thing I need.
Right.
This is not some circle jerk navel gazing thing.
Right. Of course.
Right.
Right.
It's like if I was building a house.
Right.
It's like, is he still looking for the tape measure and the hammer?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's what it's fucking
where it is
needed right now.
Yeah, that's what is needed.
Yeah. So
it's necessary.
So anyway, that's the art. But again, stay somewhat out of the executive, out of the judgment thing, out of the expectation thing, and just briefly, even on the marathon thing, is the flow state, which we've talked about this before. Is when the book's out, you don't get 15 years worth of emotional, spiritual, intellectual payoff.
No, yeah, it's
okay.
Not, yeah, right.
Now you can quantify some dollar payoff,
right,
which
conversion
literally means nothing,
right,
internally,
no,
right,
yeah.
But just like the marathon, like at mile 15, you're not getting the payoff that you had hoped you would get, right, or the optimal payoff, or whatever. Nor is there any cumulative payoff.
No.
Right?
Right.
It's the payoff is in the given segments, and even if it's reducible to a 90-minute run or a 90-minute workout and yoga, that's all the payoff you're getting.
Yeah.
Now there might be residuals like better health, improved focus, presence, things you take into the lessons you take into the next training session or ultra or whatever, right? So there are payoffs, tools, wisdom, et cetera, but there's no emotion, there's no cumulative emotional payoff. There may be relief, perhaps,
I hear you.
right?
No, yeah. I think I was just keying in on what you had to say. I think that, yeah, it's like the only thing we know for certain, and I don't mean to keep going back to this or make it dark, but like, you are going to die alone, and it's likely going to hurt. Right. And if there is any outcome that you know for certain, it's that one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is it any wonder that we live in a time that things are just seemingly nihilistic, right? Like nothing means anything.
Right.
And I think what you're saying there is that the being of being present to, I think what's amazing. So even in moments like, let's say there's something I need to get done for work. There's an assignment. There's a book I'm trying to write. Whatever it is. The outcome of that is the thing I feel the weight of. Like, let's get that thing done. Let's get it across the finish line. Let's right? And you're taught, and there's so many Bromitic things that are offered to you about doing that, how to optimize your day, all the things like we've talked about. There's the chronology way about it. There's the artist's way. There's the morning pages. There's the blah, 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 blah. Right. And all of those things are useful, but I would say only if they are manifest from an understanding. And this is something I learned from you, like that this is a restorative, sort of way to be. And how would the restored and sane Dave be right now? And that is the question, right? How would the restored and sane Jeremy, what would he be doing? And what I've found is that I have like some kind of new energy that I can source that I didn't have when I start down that road, and new energy on what might else also be possible, right? And new energy on all kinds of stuff. And suddenly, like the thing that was so weighted on me, either I complete it or I don't, but either way, I don't feel the weight anymore. I don't feel this obligation to some particular outcome or whatever, because otherwise, and what I'm able to do that most of the time, is I'm able to achieve the thing I wanted to and then some, because you talked about flow, because that's suddenly what I'm tapped into as opposed to like whatever, like other crap. And right now it could be that your flow state is just directed towards something that ain't a book.
Right.
And that's fine. I guess.
Yeah.
It is. But anyway, I mean, I've found that a kind of freedom and just feeling just relaxed when it's like, what would the sane and restored Jeremy do, considering these are the things that are in front of him, right? And because it's focused on identity, on being.
Yeah. Well, I mean, isn't it true that, like, if the focus is on the being, it doesn't really matter what you're doing.
No, right, precisely.
I mean, so, and I was, anyway, so I'm the same being as a parent, as a grandparent. I'm the same being in the gym. I'm the same being in yoga. I'm the same being here as I am in every other thing.
Right. Yeah.
So surely that's way more important than whatever the thing is.
Correct.
So that's a good takeaway, I think.
Thank you, viewer.
Yeah, you're welcome.
You're welcome, viewer.
Take that to the bank. And that, this, I literally have to wrestle, say satisfaction, out of each process of whatever the activity or the doing is,
Yes.
And then hopefully, ultimately, we talked about even early on, and I learned this from listening to other writers or other creative types, is, you could say, well, let's say in any book, particularly geared towards whatever, rewriting a narrative or a history, let's say, or self-improvement or new whatever, like the effect is the point. So to what effect? You could say, well, this has had this effect on me, or I've become this person through the process as a result of the ideas, or as a result of the questions, as a result of the constant confrontation, of reassessing and evaluating and accepting a new reality. Like, the person you are at mile 15 is not the person you were at mile 1.
Right. Okay.
And subsequent every race. You're just, who am I going to become as a result of this pursuit or this journey?
Right.
And that is the real takeaway.
Right. That's the development.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
yes.
And then the same, particularly of my book, the value to the reader is exactly the same. It's like, who you are at the beginning of the book is not the same person at the end of the book.
It's the great paradox, right? Because it's like you were saying, there's this consistency of being and a nature to that being. And there's also this development that can occur. And you get to, like, you it's a becoming.
Yeah, but is it a true becoming, or is it a regression
Yeah.
to a former state of openness and presence, this kind of thing. But I guess in any maturation arc, it ultimately comes back to
snake eating its tail.
Yes.
Back where we started.
Yes. And so, be like the child, sleep like the child, right. Play like the child.
Mountains are mountains.
Yeah. How are we doing on time? What time is it?
I gotta go.
I don't know what time we started.
I don't know either, but
it's 20 to 10.
Yeah, it's about a quarter till.
You got stuff. We did at least an hour, didn't we?
Something like that. About an hour.
Yeah, it's been about an hour. Okay,
Thanks for sticking with us, dear viewer.
Yeah. Any other futurist send-offs, benedictions, any well-wishing?
I don't think. I mean, we've certainly traversed a great deal of ground. I think on this hour.
Yeah.
Little
Did we just
walk
come back
through
to
the woods,
beginning?
and now we're back at the trailhead. So I think we're good to go. Yeah,
that's good. That's good. And and again too, we'll do more podcasts, but I think each conversation is just more layers,
more revelatory.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'm grateful to be on it with you, brother.
Cool. Love you, buddy.
Love you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Right.
Stay tuned to Rephetic Podcast, and the book's on pre-sale.
It is.
Rephetic.com, and then as soon as I get some pages and some editorial work, we're gonna have a printed book.
Exactly.
Sometime
it's happening
soon.
Exactly.
Pay no attention to those dates. So we waited this long. Anyway, we'll be back with more. Thanks for sticking by.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. To know who we are, and where we're going, we must know how we arrived here. Welcome to Rephetic, a revolutionary study of the Great Pyramid, which promises to rewrite civilization's history